Welcome to our second episode. In our first episode, we carefully married up the motor and the frame. We bolted on the stand and uprighted the bike, so far, so good. In this show, we'll attempt to fit the swing arm and shock absorbers. The rear wheel gets built and goes in, and we'll even assemble the forks. So let's get to it. Okay, it's 35 degrees Celsius today, folks, so we're starting early. And if you can hear a noise in the background, it's probably the fan because we're in a tin shed. Anywho, this contraption is a swing arm. Some prefer swinging arm, some prefer swingers parties, but that's a whole different show. Anywho, this allows the suspension to go up and down, folks. We've got to mount it on the bike. Before we do, we put this on because from past experience, we've learned that trying to fit this rear brake hose to the swing arm after you've mounted the swing arm in the frame is an absolute nightmare. And this rod here is just to hold the rear caliper in place when it's on the bike, and it's easier to do it before than after. Anywho, we're going to fit this now. First, this goes on, because if we don't put this on first, you can't get it on afterwards. Another trap for young players, folks. Perhaps we better show you what this is. This goes and activates the rear brake. We have to put this into the frame first. Makes it a whole lot easier doing it now than once the swing arm's in. It's very hard to do. Once the brake actuator is in place, Mike greases and fits the new bushes, bearings and shims to the swing arm and gently taps on the outer caps. Then, without damaging its freshly powder-coated surface, we guide it into place. Mike then slides through the pivot bolt from the correct side and finger tightens the nut. Folks, when you mount your swing arm, you want to make sure that you've got good bearings and bushes in there. Make sure there's no corrosion, because pitting is thine enemy. You've got to make sure everything's nice and smooth. Replace the bearings if you need to. We've replaced these. We've got new bushes and spacers and stuff. So there's no lateral movement. You don't want a hinge in the middle of your frame. It's not good for handling at all. All you want is up and down movement. So just double check that. Nobody wants a sloppy back end. This, like Mike's haircut, is a shocker.
You've been waiting on one to say that.
I've been planning that one for a while. Ever since you got the haircut, in fact. Anywho, it's a shocker. We have a pair of these to go on the bike because back in the good old days, most bikes had two shocks. Most bikes nowadays have one shock, monoshock rear end. The old twin shock design was ditched basically because it didn't have enough travel. Bikes didn't handle as well as they do now. It was heavier, it was less adjustable. Lots of reasons they've gone away from the twin shock design. The only bikes that really use twin shocks these days are cruisers. And you're probably not going to see a cruiser in this garage for a while. Now, since the original shock absorbers were too far gone to reuse, we decided to splash out and buy a pair of locally made, fully adjustable units. Their gloss black finish will perfectly suit the end result we're looking for. Now, you can of course pay less and buy a pair of crap shockers from a third world country. But you might as well use a pair of overripe mangoes, because sometimes it's better to pay a bit more and get something that works. While they're not all silver like the originals, they still look of the era and not too blingy, which would detract from the bike.
Two Blokes and a Motorbike is brought to you by bikereview.com.au.